This video explains the process involved when entering accredited grades data into the data entry system. This video in particular will assist those inputting and submitting estimated percentage marks in this year's Leaving Certificate and Leaving Certificate Applied classes. The system of accredited grades depends entirely on the quality of the data gathered by schools and the accuracy with which this data is recorded. You are required to take your time in relation to this process in order that the data collated through this process accurately reflects the data on the forms. Any errors made at this stage will have an impact on the accredited grades that students receive. There are 2 user roles required to enter, approve, and submit estimated percentage marks. They are the data entry user or users, typically the Leaving Certificate aide for whom this video was catered, and the approver, typically the principal. A separate video guide is also available for the approver. This video is for the data entry user and specifically those inputting and submitting for students in this year's Leaving Certificate class. School principals will receive an email with login details for the system for their approver role. The principal will then be able to create accounts for data entry users in their school. More than one data entry user can be set up on the system. If you have any issues accessing the Accredited Grades portal, you should contact the help desk on 057 932 4461. As indicated in the Guide for Schools on Providing Estimated Percentage Marks and State Examinations and Accredited Grades, Arrangements for Leaving Certificate Applied 2021, teachers will have completed Forms A and B and the subject alignment process in advance of the data entry process. Principals will have completed Forms OOS8 and OOS9 for out-of-school subjects and out-of-school learners where appropriate. These documents can be found in the Guide for Schools and Students on implementing the accredited grades process for out-of-school subjects and out-of-school learners. You've been provided with a school matrix from the State Examinations Commission. The matrix is a list of students and their levels registered to sit the Leaving Certificate examination in your school. Before they begin, schools should double-check that all the data on the school matrix is accurate, and if there is a problem with the matrix, to contact the SEC directly at entries@examinations.ie. For more information on the above documentation, please go to Leaving Certificate 2021, Guide for Schools on Providing Estimated Percentage Marks. The following is a summary of the role of the data entry user. Step 1. Paperwork. Receive and check the relevant documentation, matrix, Forms A, Forms B, Forms OOS8 and Forms OOS9. Assign class IDs to the Forms B, OOS8 and OOS9. Step 2. Entering results on the data entry system. Ensure that each student is correctly entered on the Accredited Grades data entry system. Enter the relevant class IDs on the application. Enter the estimated percentage marks as set out in Form B. Enter the estimated percentage marks for each Form OOS8. Enter a percentage mark of 0 for each Form OOS9. Ensure that all data entered is correct and submit data for approval. The process is described in detail in the section that follows. The principal will provide you with Forms A and Forms B for every Leaving Certificate class for each subject at each level in your school. You may also receive a number of Forms OOS8 and/or Forms OOS9 from the principal. You must ensure that each form is fully completed and signed by the appropriate person in advance of entering any data on the Accredited Grades data entry system. If there are any anomalies, you must inform the principal immediately, who will ensure that this is rectified. Data should only be entered from Form B and OOS8 and OOS9 onto the Accredited Grades data entry system with Forms A used only for reference. For the Accredited Grades model to work, we need to know which class group within a subject and level each student belongs to. Before logging into the data entry application, it is very important that you assign a class ID to each class and write it on the relevant Form B, OOS8 and OOS9. Assigning students to classes will be one of the first tasks to be done when you log in. You'll be much less likely to make a mistake if you have associated a class ID with each relevant form in advance. Forms OOS 8 and OOS 9 are treated as particular classes, i.e. each student for whom there is a form OOS 8 or OOS 9 should be placed in a class on their own. A class ID must be assigned to each Form B, OOS 8 and OOS 9. The format of the class ID for every form must be 2 characters consisting of 1 letter followed by 1 digit or 1 letter. For example, relevant class IDs include A1, B2, CH, DD. In the case of Forms B, only letters in the range from A to R should be used. In the case of Forms OOS 8, only the letters U, V or W should be used. In the case of Forms OOS 9, only the letters X, Y or Z should be used. Once you have a class ID assigned to each class group, you should write the class ID in the space provided on the top of Form B. In the case of OOS 8 and OOS 9, the class ID should be entered on the form beside the school roll number. The process of assigning class IDs varies for Forms B, OOS 8 and OOS 9. The below is an example for Form B. This is an alternative example for Form B. The class ID only needs to be unique within the subject level. These are examples for Forms OOS 8 and OOS 9. Note that the 2 applied maths students could be given the same class ID. This is because the class ID only needs to be unique within the particular subject level. Of course, they could also have been given different class IDs, as long as the first letter of the ID is restricted to U, V or W for Forms OOS 8 and X, Y or Z for Forms OOS 9. Your principal will have the facility to set you up as a data entry user on the Accredited Grades data entry system. In order to do this, your principal will need your email address and your mobile phone number. You'll receive an email with your login credentials. When you click on the link in the email, it will take you to the login page. You then proceed to enter your email address and the temporary password provided in the email. When you log into the system, you'll be prompted to change your password, and you should then log in using the new password. If multi-factor authentication has been enabled on your account, you'll receive a 6-digit code to your mobile phone, which you'll be prompted to enter on the screen. Once you are logged into the Accredited Grades platform, all of the subject levels for your school will be listed on the home screen. When you click on a particular subject and level, all students for that subject and level will initially be presented together on the screen. For example, all higher level biology students in the school will be listed together. The first task you must carry out is to make sure that there are no unresolved discrepancies between any of the student levels as displayed on this screen and the levels according to the information recorded on the Forms B, OOS 8 and OOS 9. This check should be undertaken for every subject and every level. If there are any students not on the application, you must contact the help desk before proceeding. In many cases, the students presented for a particular subject level will be in different class groups. Therefore, the next step is to enter the appropriate class IDs for each distinct class group within each subject level, as on the Forms B and/or Forms OOS 9, as in the screenshot. In the example above for biology, you can see that there are 2 classes in the school, which have been assigned the class IDs A1 and A2. You can also see that 2 students are studying the subject outside of school, and the school can provide them with a mark, U1 and U2. Another student is studying the subject outside of school, but the school is unable to provide them with a mark, X1. Before validating, you should generate and print a PDF of the class assignments by clicking on the PDF icon. You should compare the output to the relevant Forms B, OOS 8 or OOS 9. Once you are satisfied that all of the class IDs have been entered accurately, you should click Validate at the bottom of the screen. If all is in order, the following message will appear at the top of the screen. Once the class assignments have been validated, the option to enter marks will appear at the bottom of the screen. This will take you to the marks entry screen, from which you will have the option to enter marks for each of the classes you have just created. Select an In Progress class and enter marks for that class. In the case of students assigned to a class ID starting with X, Y or Z, a mark of 0 must be entered. Only the percentage marks for each student on the Form B can be entered. Credits cannot be entered and are not relevant to this process. In general, the same mark cannot be entered for two students in the same class. There is one exception to this rule, and it relates to the following 4 subjects: social education, sign language, mathematical applications, and information and communication technology. These subjects are assessed by written paper only. In the case where the teacher judges that the expected performance of more than one student on the written paper is 80% or above, the scaling factor of 1.25 will result in such students receiving a mark of 100%. As this could happen for more than one student, the system will allow more than one student to receive a percentage mark of 100. Here we show the marks entry screen for class ID A1. Note that marks must be between 0 and 100. Marks can have up to 2 digits after the decimal point. No two students can be assigned the same mark. It is also worth noting that the example of 58.26 in the screenshot is unlikely to arise in reality. A data set of, for example, 58, 58.25, 50.5, 58.75, and 59 is more likely in a scenario where the expected performance of each member of a subgroup of students is very similar. Before validating, you should generate and print a PDF of the class percentage marks by clicking on the PDF icon. You should compare the output to the relevant Forms B, OOS 8 or OOS 9. Once you're satisfied that you have entered the marks accurately, you should click Validate at the bottom of the screen. If you have made an error, for example, you may have entered the same mark for 2 students, you'll receive an error message and the duplicate marks will be highlighted on the screen for correction. If all is in order, you'll be taken to the following screen which verifies that the marks have been validated and has the option to submit the marks to the principal for approval. Submitting data for approval. In order to finalise the data entry process for this class, you should click Submit at the bottom of the screen. A final PDF should then be generated, printed, and attached to the relevant Form B, OOS 8 or OOS 9. If for any reason the approver does not agree that the correct data has been entered, they can choose to reject or reset the data submitted by you. What to do if the approver rejects or resets the data submitted for a class? If the approver rejects the data, the percentage marks for the specific subject and level will be returned for review and updating as appropriate. Once updated, the data should be resubmitted through the data entry system for approval. If the approver resets the data entry user will have the facility to reassign class IDs to students and to re-enter marks. Once updated, the data should be resubmitted through the data entry system for approval. If a change in the estimated percentage mark is needed on Form B or OOS 8, the data entry user should be provided with an updated form from the principal. As the subject alignment process will have been completed and all appropriate checking of the estimated percentage marks would have happened before the forms were handed over to the data entry user in the first instance, any change at this stage in the process should only be happening in exceptional circumstances. Once complete, the data entry user should return the forms A, B, OOS 8 and OOS 9 to the approver. They will need these forms to carry out the approver role. If you make an error, please alert the approver immediately so that they can reject or reset the data, which will cause it to be referred back to you for review and correction. Quality assurance. Please ensure that you have retained all paperwork in a safe place. A number of checks may be carried out as part of a quality assurance process. A randomly selected number of schools will be contacted to request a copy of all paperwork for a class, subject, or the whole school to check. The Accredited Grades Help Desk is available from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m, Monday to Friday, to assist with any issues or queries you may have in relation to the Accredited Grades data entry system, bearing in mind that due to COVID-19 health and safety restrictions, our offices are not staffed to capacity as we continue to follow public health guidelines by working from home where possible. You can email lcagusersetup@education.gov.ie or call on 057 932 4461 and select option 2. Thank you for watching.